Today's face-off on Fox Soul. Challengers Quan LX and Big Angry Adams. Ready to go blow by blow on those hot topics. Face-off on Fox Soul starts right now.
Telemundo reporter Adam Manzano had gone to Louisiana to cover the Super Bowl and was found dead in his hotel room. So when detectives get there and examine the hotel room, they realize he has a credit card missing and his cell phone. They review the surveillance footage of the hotel and see this woman leaving his hotel room. They immediately recognize her as Danette Colbert, who has a record of drugging men and robbing them. They do have her in custody, and she is facing multiple charges. Now, what makes this story even sadder? So Adam Manzano lost his wife a year prior in a horrible car accident, and the baby survived the car crash. So now this poor baby has lost her mother and father.
In this round, here's Charles Big Angry Adams.
Well, this is an appropriate topic to follow up, all right, because this speaks to the currency of the sex industry and how bad actors in that industry often get away with criminality because it is underreported or not reported at all, because someone typically has to implicate themselves if they acknowledge that they were buying sex, which is another reason why we should get off the moral high horse and act like that human beings are driven by sexual desire. But we have a woman, Danette Colbert, who has made a lifelong journey to assault, drug, and steal from men that she approaches under the auspices of selling sex to. And downstream from this imbecilic restorative justice paradigm that we have in America now, which really should have been, hey, we need to make our justice system more fair, we need to end the drug war and its biases against black people, and we need to focus on victim crime, has instead allowed governments on the local level, the state level, and the national level to say, hey, we're just going to let criminals keep being criminals, and we're not going to protect victims. This woman, Danette Colbert, was responsible for a prior death, right, or at least involved, where someone died and she stole from them, selling sex to them. And there are scores of people that she has robbed while falsely selling sex to people. And she has been arrested time and time again and cut loose, not just in Louisiana, but also in Nevada, which used to be a very strict liability state for criminality. She has, in fact, committed felonies while on felony probation. And when does the government finally do something? When something horrible happens. This woman was known to roofie guys and rob them, and nothing happened to this scumbag. This Manzano guy, I mean, look at his life story. You know, a Telemundo reporter down there for the Super Bowl, still in anguish from the death of his wife and serious, I believe, injuries to his child. And then he's a single father. He probably hasn't had room time to date. He's probably just walking around drunk on Bourbon Street, and some woman comes up and says, hey, I'll give you some sex, roofies him, and then dies. And if they don't put her in prison, I don't know the female version of Angola, but if she doesn't rot in whatever facility that is for the rest of her life for murdering this man, it's an injustice, and it should have never occurred, because she should have already been in prison. But restorative justice, let's let all the bad guys go free.
You know, I really feel saddened for the child involved in this case. The child has now lost its mother to a tragedy and now her father to a tragedy. She'll grow up never knowing either one of them. And I do sympathize to some degree with the husband, because to lose your wife in that manner, and now your child has serious injuries coming out of that crash but surviving. I have not walked a day in his shoes, so I really don't want to pass judgment on him to the same degree as we would judge some other men. But at the same time, I would caution people, yes, this woman has a history, and it appears that it's a factual history, that she's known for drugging men who want to buy sex from her, and she agrees to sell them sexual favors and acts, but then get them to the room and drug them and rob them for thousands. But at the same time, Charles, we need to wait before we cast final judgment on Ms. Colbert. Let's look at the autopsy report, because we're assuming that she killed him. We don't know that yet because the autopsy report is not back yet. But Ms. Colbert, I agree with you. She's been doing this for a long time. If she'd have had harsher punishment, perhaps this man would still be alive. But I know for a fact he would still be alive if he wasn't trying to buy some poontang pie. He would be alive if he wasn't trying to buy some coochie chaws. Look, we want to condemn the women who work in the sex industry, who sell sex, but we don't want to condemn the men who are paying for it. We don't want to condemn the men who are feeding that sex industry of sex trafficking. Many of these women are sex trafficked, children are sex trafficked because of men like him that have an appetite to financially support that industry. They are scum also. So yes, the women are wrong for doing it, but at the same time, the men who are patronizing it and buying it, they're just as wrong. So she's a scourge on society, but he is too. What I don't like what's happening in this case, though, is you would think that more people would come out and just say, hey, look, I'm being honest with you, Charles, about this.
Nice change of pace.
If a woman has a right to say and control her body, that's the abortion argument. No man has a right to tell a woman what she can do with her body. Well, if that's the case, and that's why we're fighting for abortion like many women's groups are, well then if a woman wants to sell herself sexually to a man, a woman, whoever, if that's her choice and she's of sound mind and age, legally she should be allowed to. It's her body. If she want to sell it and he agrees to pay for it, she sets the financial terms and conditions. He gets the menu, he reads the menu. I'll take that appetizer and I'll take this for the full course meal and I'll leave a tip behind. If that's what the agreement is between two consenting adults, that's what it should be. It's her body.
Okay, you're saying this as if it's something I disagree with. You're the only one that disagrees with this. The problem in the sex industry is coercion, right? When men typically, but there are women that have done it too, force women or horrifically children into providing sexual services for money. That's a problem, and that should always be a crime, and the people involved in that should be under the prison, period. But conversely, if a woman or a man wants to sell sexual services on their own volition to another woman or a man, absolutely it should be legal. In fact, if it was legal, you would have far less of this, right? Far less of evil people like Miss Colbert who use that situation, the gray areas, the dark corners, to exploit and antagonize. But this is nothing new in that area. I mean, famously, Cardi B bragged about drugging and robbing men when she was a stripper, right? This is something known not just in New Orleans, but New York and other places. This is something known that's occurring.
But everybody know about that, about prostitutes drugging men.
But right. Well, Adam Manzano didn't, right? And you just called this dead man. Hold on.
Simple Google search.
You just called this dead man a scourge. You victim blamed. Do I think
he is?
No, he's not.
Was he committing a crime?
Do I think?
Was he committing a crime?
Let me finish.
No. She was committing a crime for what she did to him. He was committing a crime for solicitation of prostitution.
Again,
that's a crime.
No, hold on. For Danette Colbert, you were like an African-American woman, so Quanell's kind of on her
murder,
side.
When it comes to the charge of murder.
Quanell's like, oh, no, we got to give her due process. And I agree.
Autopsy report determines murder.
I agree that she should get due process, right? But she should have already been in prison. And she shouldn't have been in prison she was not selling sex. And you're assuming that Manzano agreed to buy sex. She could have just said, hey, let's go have sex.
Stop it, brother.
Right?
Stop it. Now,
and then
look
she
here.
killed him. No, hold on.
She's a sex industry worker. She ain't having sex for free.
No, but she's not. She's not a sex industry worker. She's a
robber.
She's a murderer. She's a criminal. You don't know that.
But guess what? She committed a crime.
She could be drugging and robbing everybody and not giving any sex.
He committed one too. Solicitation of prostitution in the state of Louisiana is a crime.
You called this dead man a scourge. Now,
he is a scourge.
Probably because
any man that's financially supporting the sex trafficking industry is a scourge on society.
In your position, right? He's not a black man, so you're against him.
It has nothing to do with it, Charles.
Absolutely. That's the only reason you're of supporting her.
If we all know that sex trafficking has done great harm to America. Sex trafficking has destroyed many women.
Not.
And if we got men that's paying for it, they are a scourge on society, but they're feeding that industry.
That the prohibition of prostitution, People like you that act like OnlyFans people shouldn't be allowed to volunteer at their kids' schools.
It's a form of prostitution.
But here's the thing. You love sex, Quanell. You love it.
What natural man don't?
Okay, exactly.
What natural man don't?
Thank you for proving my point.
What natural man
Men love
don't?
sex.
If you're a natural
women
man.
love sex, and we should stop treating sex like it's this evil taboo thing. And if people want to sell it and people want to buy it and there's no coercion, but if you had
Consenting adults.
licensing, if you had consenting adults, licensing, testing, then all of this weird stuff that Danette Colbert exploited because it was in the gray areas of society and she used it to murder people because she's a pig, horrible person,
But wait a minute,
it
Charles.
would largely
Let
go
me ask you
away.
this, Charles.
So as you sit
She's
there
48 years old.
moralizing, right?
What the hell is he doing buying a prostitute at 48-year-old prostitute? You gonna buy some 48-year-old spoiled fish?
Well,
you gonna buy some funky
women can't be beautiful?
48 years old?
You think women can't be beautiful
Charles,
and fit and good at sex at 48?
Any woman that's been working in the sex industry for years, by the time she's 48, that fish is absolutely dead and spoiled, partner. You don't pay for that no more. At 48, she can't give it away no more.
How old are you?
I'm 54.
You're 54. He tells the truth. I'm only 52. He's 2 years older than me. He's been lying for years.
No, I just turned 54.
Whatever. Yeah, you're still a year. You said you were 52 like 6 weeks ago.
No, that's not true. Now you're lying on me.
Anyhow, you're 54.
Right.
You spoiled? You rotten?
I ain't been selling mine on the corner.
Okay. Well,
I ain't been going around the country selling mine.
So there are 48-year-old women that are still okay?
That's traveled America from her youth selling coochie all the way up to 48. When she hit 48, you a damn fool to pay for that. Why would you pay for some 40-year-old prostitution coochie when you got 23-year-olds, 25-year-olds, 30-year-olds that ain't got that many miles on them? Can you imagine the miles on that thing at 48, Charles?
So here's a possibility.
At 48, she couldn't give it away.
First of all, absolute misogyny.
That thing probably so wide, you could pull a diesel in it, do a whole U-turn, and never touch the walls.
Pig.
Why the hell you going to pay for that at 48 years old?
That Manzano could have been intoxicated. He could have just walked through the quarter, and she said, hey, come and get some. She might not have been a prostitution situation, but at the end of the day,
no, she put a price tag on it.
You don't know that. And you don't know that he's
Did
a
not tell you just the other day that Philmo Slim and Bishop Don Juan said that coochie would sell when cotton and corn won't?
Okay.
That is not.
Right.
That is a recession-proof
You are
industry.
proving my point.
That's a recession-proof
We should
industry.
legalize prostitution, and Dana Colbert should die in prison.
Oh,
she should have already been
that.
in prison for life.
Not die.
Die in prison.
Tased by police and pulled from a car after he suffered a seizure and crashed. As KTVU crime reporter Henry Lee explains, this lawsuit says while the crash itself caused no injuries, those officers left him bloodied and ignored their training.
Let's go. Let's get out of the car. You're going to get tased. You're about to get tased. We want to help you, but do not fight it. You will get ripped out of this car. We're not playing you. Get out of the car.
Body camera video shows Hercules police swearing at and trying to force Jack Bruce out of his crashed Toyota as he's recovering from his first ever seizure. Moments later, Officer Angel Garcia tases him.
Ow! Get out of the car!
He's tased again and again. Bruce howls in pain. He emerges bloody.
No memory. The only thing I remember is the video of seeing it.
Bruce tells KTVU he has no recollection.
In this round, here's Quanell X.
Charles, that was a young white Caucasian gentleman who was the victim of excessive use of force, police misconduct, in my opinion. The Hercules Police Department, who tased him 3 times because they assumed, I believe, and made the assumption that he probably was intoxicated or on some type of controlled substance, the way he was unresponsive, not knowing that he was having a medical emergency, having a seizure. I've had several of these cases brought to me over the last 2 years of people who were having medical emergencies, and automatically when the police show up at the scene, they make an assumption that the person is on some type of drugs or they're either intoxicated, and they proceed completely different than what they would even proceed and follow training if someone needs a medical assistance or medical emergency. There's proper protocols and training that tells police officers what to do if somebody needs help medically wise. Call EMS, etc., call paramedics. But this is happening more and more than what people think, and it's happening now. We can see to more than just black people and Hispanic people. It's happening to everybody because these cops are making these faulty assumptions that people either high on drugs or they're either intoxicated. Thank God he didn't die, because could you imagine if he was having a medical emergency much more serious than that, then you using a stun gun on him, you could have killed him. I believe that more training is absolutely necessary for these officers to stop these kind of incidents from happening. You remember the case that you and I debated just several weeks back of a gentleman who had a false police call placed on him. He was he couldn't hear, was a deaf young man, and he couldn't speak also, so he was mute and he was deaf. And they got a fake police call on this man, and we was leaving out the store, and they beat the living hell out of him because he was unresponsive, where he couldn't talk and he couldn't hear, he couldn't communicate. This is happening more than what people think, but there needs to be better training for these officers, period.
But I mean, I don't think these officers involved should be better trained. These specific officers, I think they should all be fired, right? It is something that is addressed in the academy, and there are things that even, like there are some forms of diabetes and other things, sugar issues, that'll even make you smell like you've been drinking beyond, so it'll be even more similar to DWI. Here, it was a seizure, right? And they went in there with the mindset. Now, it kind of defeats your purpose. I mean, your typical argument, and you led with, there's a Caucasian white man. I don't think his race plays at all. And in fact, it exemplifies that bad officers are willing to oppress anyone, and that this white privilege to be free of this is not accurate, right? More importantly, in this case, I believe both his father-in-law and his father were both law enforcement. And this man, he's 22 now, he was 21 when this happened. They went up there with a mindset, which is an evil mindset for law enforcement, which we are deciding this is what occurred before we investigate to see what occurred. It is end-loaded policing, where an officer, instead of surveying the totality of the circumstances and coming to a decision and then acting accordingly, walks up to this car and says, I am assuming he's intoxicated, and I'm going to act accordingly. Now, do I think in that part of California they're probably dealing with a crisis of opioids and stuff like that? Of course they are. But if you've got to the point in your law enforcement career where you have lost your humanity and you seek to see people as individuals, and instead you see them as punching bags and you're just waiting for the excuse to be allowed to stop punching, you have no business being in law enforcement. Because even this, like in this scenario, this was not even a scenario where he should have evidenced like having some sort of hypoglycemic shock where you evidence like you're intoxicated, you act like you're intoxicated. He was having a seizure, and it's insane. The whole thing is insane. And I mean, you led with race. I don't think race is important at all in this circumstance. I think this is an example of bad policing versus good policing. And what we need to do in America is we need to stop tolerating bad policing when it is captured objectively on a body cam. Obviously, people can lie on law enforcement, but also law enforcement can lie. And in their police reports here, it appears these officers told some whoppers of untruths, right? And they were protected often, by the body cam, and they need to be fired. Often, there needs to be no covering up, and then they need to write a check to pay for his damages.
Let me say this, Charles. I did speak in the beginning of this segment about him being a Caucasian gentleman.
You led with it.
And then I went on to say that this is happening to everybody now with these cops.
I know, which is not usually what you say. Usually you just say,
based on what I
evil
said
white
on
men
this
oppressing
show,
people of color.
Take for what I'm saying right now as the subject of this hand.
Okay.
But Charles, let me say this to you, man. Police, whether people can admit it or not, I know we love the police, you want to support the police, and you should, the good ones. Police lie all the time in police reports, man. A lot of them do. And when a lot of them feel that they need to cover their tracks, they'll even cut off their body cams and claim, oh, it was off, I forgot to turn it on. It's amazing things that they do now, Charles.
You're telling me these things like it's nothing new. I had an officer one time, when I was an officer and acting supervisor, right? Go back and this is before body cams, but we had him in the booking, go back and erase video of a booking incident that implicated him for punching. It was actually an African-American officer and a white man, but for punching a guy who was handcuffed but spit on him, right? I didn't think there was anything wrong for striking him to stop him from spitting on him, right? But you can't erase the damn video.
You erase
right?
evidence.
And I have long said, back even when I sat on the board of the Houston Police Foundation, I was an advocate for buying body cameras with foundation dollars because video protects good police from bad people,
but they're being altered
Hold on, and protects good people from bad police. Obviously, if you shut it off, it should be a violation of policy.
And it's not.
But the real problem is, it depends on the agency.
There should be penalties.
But the real problem is that we are not firing cops when they're caught doing awful stuff on camera. We need to be more aggressive and less tolerant.
Do you think
and build police departments that have a
are
culture?
Not firing cops as much as they should?
Absolutely.
Because they cannot find enough cops to employ?
No, I think
because right now across the country, for the last 3 to 4 years, there's been a mass retirement and resignation of cops who don't want to be cops anymore. And a lot of these mayors are saying the reason why the crime rate shot through the roof because they don't have enough police officers to hire, and they're still trying to hire cops.
No, I mean, I think there are still people willing to be cops, but I do think it's far less now because of those loud voices like yours who spent years condemning all law enforcement.
No,
who spent years,
we condemn the bad law enforcement, not the good ones.
But
we condemn bad cops, and what we wanted was police reform in the right manner. Nothing wrong with that.
What's really heartbreaking is how you talk to African-American police officers and you feel they can't even live in their neighborhood openly as law enforcement because of retribution and treatment. Used to be when I was a cop in the 90s, now mind you, I didn't fight the war on drugs, I was very, very public service oriented, I was a great cop, but you would go into stores and restaurants and they would love to have you there because I worked in a very bad part of Houston, right? Very bad part, lots of crime. They wanted me there because I promoted safety, right? Now we have
no
this
black
anti-cop,
cop that's a good cop
windows
with
down,
fear living in the black community.
Absolutely
no black
not.
cop that's a good cop
Absolutely
has anything
not.
to fear
These
living in
are
the black
cops that
community.
should be fired, but we need to
No,
recognize
those are cops
and
who are
uphold
making an
civil
excuse.
service.
That's it for the Face Off on Fox Soul. We'll catch you next time.